Now you know how to create a typography style guide, a color style guide. Let's switch now to the effect style guide before spacing style guide, and then we'll combine all of them together into one style guide that you'll be using for as a deliverable for your own personal websites, as an element for your UI kit styles, and maybe as an element for your design system that you are creating. Let's get started. Effect style guide. How to create effects, what is that, and where to use it, and why we still have to know how to create styles instead of variables. Well, let's dive in. First of all, effects in web design. What kind of effects we can find? Well, drop shadow, inner shadow, borders or strokes. Strokes in Figma for designers, borders and outlines when you are delivering it to developers. When you explain that, okay, we'll have to use this stroke there, it's up to a developer whether to use a border on an outline. There is a difference, but it's on the developer side. Just keep in mind that strokes in design is borders and outlines in CSS styles. Now, also rounded corners. Yes, it can be like a separate thing for an entire element, for the entire component, but it also can be style, a variable that you can apply as an effect. Next thing is background blur, layer blur, background pattern, gradients, background image, and combination of all of these different things. You probably thought before that there are only like the effects that you can apply in web design are only drop shadow that you can apply for cards, for sections, and maybe for buttons. And that's basically it. Honestly, no. This is most likely you get it from somewhere from Instagram accounts, or maybe if you are learning about material design guidelines, you probably saw there that what they use as an effect is elevation. And elevation is just drop shadow for the light theme or color for the dark theme. It doesn't mean that you have to apply the mobile app design styles and guidelines to web. No, these are two different separate things. What you have to know about these two different things, that web design is where you are creating an online presentation of the product, of the business, or of a brand. It can be a person, it can be you. And when you are creating a mobile app, it's application, it's something that people can apply to solve their problem. This is more interactive stuff rather than informational one. Okay? So that's why keep in mind these things, that they always keep in mind that everything that you learn about design, always think about why, and always think about where can I apply it, and should I apply it absolutely everywhere, or it's just for one specific thing, or what changes I can do if I'm gonna apply it somewhere else. This is what I'm talking about, elevation. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to use elevation when you are designing websites. You can use just regular effects like drop shadow, inner shadows, gradients, and so on and so forth. Now, when you know the effects that you can apply in web design, let's understand where we can apply them. And we can apply them to buttons, sections, cards, images. By images, I mean like the media sections, headings, paragraphs, entire body, icons, illustrations. Sounds like, oh, too much information. We need a little bit more practice and examples to see them. Well, let's create. Instead of showing me to you different, websites where you already can find these different effects, let's create them step by step. So here I have an element, a section of the website. It can be a hero section, for example. Let's start applying and creating the styles, specifically like effects styles. So then you will be able to add them to the style guide and you will have the typography style guide section, color style guide section, effect style guide section, and spacing style guide section. This will be about effects. So here, if you take a look at this hero section here, pretty simple one, perfect for landing pages, for SaaS products, for portfolio even. Just change the text and it will be awesome. But what you can see here from effects perspective, well, I see at least 2 effects. I could create 3 of them. I'll show you where the 3rd one, but currently what I see, the one of the effects is the background. We see the pattern there and also the gradient, and you're like, what? So yeah, if you watch the graphic design, Figma for graphic design, you know that we apply lots of stuff in web design, for web apps, for TV apps, for mobile applications, for everything. We apply a lot from graphic design. While these are 2 different separate industries, but when it comes to illustrations, backgrounds, shadows, and even typography, we take the most important things from graphic design. So that's why it's so crucial, it's so important for a web designer to know graphic design. That's why I created this section. That's why I created that module, graphic design, where you can learn what you can apply, then what you can use in web design. So go and check that module, definitely, if you haven't seen that yet. Now, how to create these things and how to convert them into effects. Well, let's get back. So we have a background here, and we also have a shadow for this button. The 3rd effect is these colors. And here we could have like kind of just 2 different colors, you know, the black one that we created in the color style guide for headings, and then the light gray that we also created as a variable. And it can be like a span element if you're familiar with HTML. So in HTML, this would look like H1 here, close H1, and inside you will have text, which is create a professional, then span, then effect style guide, another text, then close span, and then text. And now what developers would do here, they would create in CSS the styles for H1, use color and the color that we use there. You got it. But also it will be H1 span and the color that will be different. Here the color black or headings, and here it will be color light gray. But what we defined, whether we are going to use just only the primary colors, the semantic ones, or contextual ones, it's up to you. So this is what it would look like. And Command E, and this is what it would look like in HTML, and this is what it would look like in CSS. That's it. But we can create also an effect here. So then for the H1, maybe of a particular class, we'll have here not a color, one of them will be color, and there also will be background, image or just background. And this is exactly what I'll show. This is not your stuff if you are not a developer, a front-end developer who does the HTML and CSS. That's, you don't have to know that. You just create your thing, you just create your design, and that's it, just give it to developers. So that's why I'm gonna delete it completely from here, not to overwhelm you. Now let's create all these effects that we see here. And we see here 3 different effects. Well, I'll cover the sections in the next one. First of all, let's create the effect for the buttons. which is shadow. And here, what we can create two different effects. The first one for the, even three, for the buttons. The first one will be drop shadow default. The second one will be drop shadow hover. And the final one will be drop shadow active. This is exactly when you pressed and still holding the cursor on the button while you pressed, or a user pressed. So in order to do that, we take the button and let's imagine that, first of all, we apply it here. Let's remove the drop shadow, so I'll show you exactly how to create it. Effects, drop shadow, yes please. X will leave 0, and in, I would say 99% of the situation, I keep X value for the drop shadow 0. So the light goes directly from the top to bottom. Sometimes I do this effect like something, you know, like 8. I'll just show it to you, but then we'll get back to exactly the effect that I'm going to create. X 8, Y 8, blur 0, and here I will use the color exactly that I want it to apply. Maybe it will be darker version of this exactly. Maybe you can go with 4. And this is how we create this strong shadow effect. It's usually used for the brutalism style, so you can go with that if you are working with this particular style. So you see a huge difference between this button and this button, while just drop shadow. And this can be also an effect for a particular website. That's why I recommend you to not to download the UI kits from somewhere, but I recommend you to create your own UI kits or design system or style guides, because you will be able to create your own and you will know exactly where they are, how to change them, how to apply them, their naming, and you will be able confidently to deliver it to developers. Because if you just grab the material design style guide for Figma and like, hey, here with the colors that we're gonna use, and developer asks you, for example, why do we need to create like 50 different shades of the same color? Are we gonna use all of them? And you're like, you know, I just wanted to make it a little bit like, you know, expanded version just in case. And this is where you feel your, like, where you lose your confidence. But when you know exactly what you're creating, when you created your style guide yourself, in this case, you will have like, let's imagine exactly what we created, like just only 5 different neutral colors and 3, for example, accent colors. That's it. Then the developer asks you, for example, are these all the colors that we're going to use? Yes, exactly. And these are semantic colors. We can discuss with you what the context will be for all of these colors. And we'll create a perfect design system in web. Let's do that, because I know exactly what I'm choosing here. And the accent colors that we will apply them for the default state, for the hover state, and the active state. That's it. That's it. We don't need any other accent colors or any other shades of this color. We are creating a clear website that people will love and that people will go to get the message, not to learn like, oh, this is where we have that 16th shade of that blue color that was in material design guideline. No, that's why I recommend you to create your own styles. So here, let's get back to this, our button. Drop shadow, but in this case, what we're gonna use, as I said, for 99% of the situations, we're using for X value 0, so the shadow goes directly under 90 degrees from top to bottom. For the Y position, you can set, it depends on what style you want to achieve. If you want to create really soft shadows, I recommend you to go with something like, for Y position, something like 4 or 8, right? And for the blur is multiplier of the what you have for the Y position for the Y value, which is 8, and then multiply it by 2 or by 3. And that's it. It will be more than enough for you. So when we multiply it by 2, it will be 16. It's okay. It looks good. We will just change here the opacity of the color to something like 50. And that's it. This is the style that we can go with. But I usually go with something bigger to create a completely different effect. 24, which is 8 multiplied by 3. Boom. Done. Now we have soft shadow. But as you can see, it's not the same as here. Why so? Because in that particular case here, I use not this dark version of blue. I use a lighter version of it. Basically the same as we have for the bottom. Done. And the second thing, I use like a little bit deeper drop shadow. So the light goes specifically from the top. So that's why the drop shadow goes even lower here. So that's why I would go here with something like 15. And it's okay. This is what I want to tell you, that it's okay to use the numbers that are not divisible by 2 or 4 or 8. It's okay. We are working with web design here. We're working with values here. Nothing should be divided by 4 here. And today, the displays that we have, we don't have to follow. We have Retina displays. We have 4K screens, 8K screens. We have 2K screens. We don't have to use like 4 pixels grid, 8 pixels grid to achieve pixel perfection. That's exactly what was used. Like back in the days, 8-point grid was created in graphic design. This is how they created all these lines, and it will be cells, and this is kind of was modular system. 4-point grid was created a little bit later for digital design. So the screen, because the sizes of the screens were divisible by like number of pixels, and because of that, to create a pixel perfect image, everything should be divisible by 4, later by 2. But today, with all these incredible, beautiful screens, you don't have to follow those things. Just remember it. And when it comes to effects, it's definitely not, because here we're working with not with width and height. We are working here just with values, and values shouldn't always be divisible by 4. Just remember that. And I'm telling it to you from my 15 years of experience, like practical experience. Nobody ever from senior staff or higher staff or really experienced designer told me that, oh man, no, all the values should be divisible by 4. No, because they understand it doesn't make sense. Only like junior, mid-level designers will start saying like, oh, like, it should be divisible by 4 or 8 because this is what Apple, Google recommends. No, they don't recommend that. If you check their style guides, they don't recommend that. So keep it in mind. Anyway, let's get back. Why? We are talking about effects. Y position 15, blur 30, 50% here. It depends like how much to set the percentage here. It's based on your experience. It's based on the style that you want to achieve. And it's based mostly on what it should look like in your opinion. Does it look great already? Perfect. Just go for it. If it looks something like so-so, then go and continue looking for the values. The only values that you should play with is blur and Y position here in this case, in this particular case, when it comes to buttons. And 50% here. As you can see, there is a spread value. If you watch the Figma Fundamentals module, I explained there where exactly spread value is used. And here, I would be happy to use the spread effect. But in Figma, unfortunately, Spread can be applied only to shapes and mostly to rectangles and not to frames. And because here I use for the button the auto layout, which is frame, you can't change spread. But when you will create the style guide, the specific style guide, this is what I recommend you to do. You see all these values? We haven't finished yet. So create the similar effect like here. But for the rectangle, it just shape rectangle. Okay? Then go to drop shadow, and now you have the spread value available. Because when you will create the style guide that developers will use, they will have option to go and provide all these elements in CSS. Here you can set spread to minus, and the value something like -10, something like half of the Y position, Y value, -8 for example. And boom, now if I set it to 100%, you see that, so you can see it exactly what's happening. Let me show you. I'll set Y position to 30, and let me show you the difference between spread minus something and spread 0. Spread 0, this is how the shadow goes. But if you want to create this realistic effect that the element is closer to you and the dropped shadow that goes on the surface, goes on the background, is a little bit smaller because the light is a huge soft box is in front of this website and it goes from all the sides. So the shadow will not be spread like to the sides of the button. No, it will be behind the button. And in order to create this behind the button effect, you use the spread minus some value. And this is already a great effect that we achieved here. And we can set it to 50%. And this is our default state. The only thing that, yeah, I would still make a little bit lower the Y position. And this is probably a really great math effect here. Not math, but math effect here. Y value, let me type it here. Y value minus blur equals spread. You can use this effect. So what does it mean? So when you're creating a button, and let's imagine that here I want to use something different. For the Y position, I'm going to use 10. Then the blur is 20 or 30. So the spread is 10 minus 20 minus 10. And if here, then the button will look like that. Already cool. If I add stroke, FFF, you will see what exactly is happening here, where the shadow is. You see how beautiful it looks already. Awesome. So this is the effect that you can use for the button, and that's exactly from what we'll create the effect style for our style guide. Not from the auto layout, but from the shape, because now we have spread here. And even if spread is not applied to, we will not see it in our designs, it's not applied to frames. Developers, when developers create these buttons, it will work. So in development, the shadow in CSS will be border here 0, what we said there, 20, 30, minus 10. And then our color, which I recommend to use RGBA in this case, because you can still use hash code, but you have to understand how to set up the right value for the opacity. I told you that it's an advanced course for professionals, and I hope that I explain you absolutely everything and even how it works on the backend. So RGBA, and what does it mean? That here you just go to color, switch it to RGB 1033 236, 10, 33, 236, 36, comma 0.5 or just 0.5. This is what exactly developers will see and will use. Correct? 1033, 236, 0.5. Yep. This is what developers will use. When we'll go and discuss the dev mode in one of the final modules, that's exactly where I'll show you where they will find all this information if you want to provide this information to developers, if you want your designs to look exactly on the live version to look exactly what you designed. Again, you don't have to know HTML and CSS, but if you know it, it's your superpower. You don't have to know how to write really great copy for the website, but if you know it, it's your superpower. If you know both, it's your superpower. If you are really good in marketing, it's your additional superpower, so you can sell your skills. Think always about your superpowers. Now, that's the style. Let's create an effect out of that. You see, we go here, how to create an effect. How to create effects I already showed you in the first module, but here we'll create a specific effects for our style guide. So we create style, name here. What I recommend to type effects / so we created the folder effects. And now you can type effects. Again, naming convention should depend on you or the company you're working at. You define it together. That's why I'm not giving here the naming conventions, because they're so different across all the companies. And if I provide you a specific convention and you're working in a company where you're using a different one, it creates confusion which one to use. Alex recommended me to use this one while we're using this, why that? No, there is no particular thing. It should be decided by the company or by you specifically. You can even use here, instead of effects, you can use here, you know, drop shadow. Drop shadow 1. That's it. That's it. But I want to show you one of the options. Effects. Here, button. Here, primary. Here, default. And then drop shadow. Create style. Now, we take the button that we have, and here in the effects, instead of drop shadow, remove it. We just go to effects. And here we have an effect. If you don't see it, let me bring it here. Effects, button, primary, drop shadow. Boom, done. And as you can see, it doesn't have here the spread. When I go to the effect for this particular element, we'll see the spread here, but no matter if I change it even to -50, it's not applied here because it just doesn't work for frames. But keep in mind that it will work for developers. This is the first effect that we created. The second one that we could create here. First of all, you can change the color for the hover effect, but you can play with the hover. Here you just close it. For the hover effect for this button, you'll create default state, hover state. For the hover state, you have two options to go with. You can create, basically it's like elevation. When you hover, what do you want to see the button to be, to do? Do you want it to be closer to a user, so it's like you attract with your cursor, you attract the button, or you want to show that it can be pressed, so it will be closer to the surface, to the background, or further from it? And based on that, for the hover state, you remember, so by default, like from the very beginning, we had this effect, so I just copied that. But the second thing that I did for this element here, I detached the style for the effects. Now I go here, and let's imagine that I decided that the button will be further from the surface. In this case, I will change the Y position of it, something like even 40, and the blur I can change to 50. So now when we hover on the button, we will see exactly what it looks like. So basically, if I create these two different elements, and here I create one white, another one, remove, bring here the same name, frame 3, and now here I create go to prototype, and for the button, not on click, but while hovering, show me this state. That's it. So now when I play it, I'll bring it here. You see it's different size because we have different text, but what we can do, we can just set the fixed width, which can be 240, and here it will be also 240. So now when we go to our prototype mode, play, this is how it works. You see it's further from the state. The only thing, like if you're doing everything right, we're not using instant, we're using smart animate, and 300 milliseconds will be more than enough. So now, I hate that it changes the text because I never ever do that. Never change the text on hover. You see what's happening? The button is further from the background. And you can do even one additional thing. You can move it a couple of pixels higher. So now, when we are here and I'm hovering, you see there is an interaction. So now we can interact with this button. Now we can play with that. And the next thing that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create an effect out of it. So design, we created it. And here, another thing that I would do, I would also change the spread. I would make the spread even smaller, like -20. I'm not going to do that right now. You got the idea. So I just click create, and here also effects / effect button primary, state in this case hover, and then drop shadow. It can be drop shadow and then hover, or drop shadow and then default. Create style. Done. So now for the hover state, I'll have the button. We can later, when we'll start creating UI components, we'll just create a component button primary that will have all the states. But for all those states, we will apply the effects as a style. You got it, right? So this is what it will work, how it will work. And now the final state is focus state or active state, like pressed state, but as a pseudo CSS selector in CSS, it will be active state. And for the active state, here, what we're gonna do, we detach the effect, and here we click, boom, go here. Now we make it even smaller than what we had here. So if it was like really 20/30 here, now I'm using 10/20. Okay, but keep in mind spread. Always first create effects using the shapes, so you see what exactly it will look like. So now, as you can see, it's not visible. Why so? Because we have spread -10. We use -2 maybe here. and 15 for Y position. Something like that. And here I would use spread a little bit lower, but I'm not going to change it right now. And here I created the active state, and for the active state I'm going to create new effect, effects slash effects button primary active slash drop shadow. You can also call effect again, different naming. You can call effects, drop shadow, and then for what? It should be defined by your company or by yourself for your documentation, because you will be using that. Create style. Now I apply this style instead of drop shadow. I apply the style exactly. You see, it would be better to show the style before, because it's really hard to see. Like you have to hover and wait to see what exactly hover. Okay, active here. Done. And now the next thing that I'm going to do here, I'll just create another state here. And for this button, I'll apply active. And then when I go to prototype mode here, not on click, not while hovering, but while pressing, 300, no, because now we're pressing, we have an action, and the action is usually faster than the appearance of the element, so that's why the ease out is smaller. How to do all these things in Motion UI Design masterclass you can find. Done. So now when I play effect, you see it's floating when I'm hovering on the button, but when I click on that, I see the press state. The only thing that I would bring it down by the number exactly, so what we had by default on default state, select again, hover, press. You see, like I'm actually pressing it. It looks like press. It looks exactly like if in the real world I would click on the button that I see, and this is what I expect. I expect it to go down, to go inside. And this is how cool is that. This is the first thing that we created. This is the effect. But in addition to that, we also, this is what we could apply for the button. Remember that we could create a mix of everything. So another thing that we can create, remember that we, in the color style guides, we created variables. But the thing is that variables don't allow you today to create gradients, but styles allow you to do that. So when I go to style, I can change the gradient from something like, let's create something cool, something interesting, not like with blue maybe, but something, you know, that goes from this color, even from that, like this, a little bit realistic effect. And maybe a little bit further here. Then one won't see the default state. So okay, let's get back to our colors here. So because I want you to know exactly what's happening, so I just make, this is the additional color that we can create in the variables and the style guide, and I make it, I'm changing the hue of this button, and I also can change the effect here. So the shadow goes at a particular angle, and then out of this gradient I create the style as well. Boom, effects here. You know what I don't like here already, so we have to fix that before. You see this white color that we had, so I remove it. So I know that when the color is somewhere here, I know that it goes further. Done. Perfect. So now go here, create effects. It's because it's still effect. Effects. Here, button. Maybe not just button. In this case, we'll do something different. Gradient. Here, go to light blue, dark blue, or accent. Something like this. Create style. Now, when I go here, instead of using variables that we created, semantic color and contextual colors, effects, boom, done for this button, effects, done for this button. Perfect. Awesome. Now, if I have it as a component, anyway, we'll create UI components later. What I'm going to do right now is just I select all these elements and apply for the fill, the gradient. And this is how you create these buttons with all these different states. So even if I remove these things from here and I position this element right in the middle, and these two different states, we'll create all these UI components later. Today we're creating the style guide. This is what you will see. It looks already different. It looks interesting, it looks modern, this is how you change styles. And this is how we just created 4 different effects for 3 different states of the button based on the drop shadow. It can be also include the inner shadow if you want to, like all these different things. And also we created the additional one for the gradient for the button. And then later we'll be able to apply it somewhere else. I'll show you where. By the way, I promised you to show how I would use here this element as a style. Well, I would just go to fill layer, and instead of having both of them here, you know, previously we would have just color, text heading, that's it. No, but what we can do, we can go to gradient. One of the effects which is pretty popular today is to have the gradient that goes from like the actual color to lighter version or to the darker version of it. It depends on the theme that you're using. It already can be an effect, a style, but if you want to create a particular that style guide, that style where the middle line is written in gray, I wouldn't say that this is a perfect way to do that, but still, because I'm teaching you here also the creativity and resourcefulness, I want to show you how to apply that style. So here in the fill layer, what are we going to do? We go to the gradient, set it in the middle of everything. But the second thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to put this color here, duplicate this color to go right here, duplicate the gray that goes up to here. So we have them there, and the final one goes after the gray one and up to the very end. The only thing that we have to check that all the lines are set properly, and we see that nothing goes on another side. I say that this is not perfect, this is not ideal, but this is one of the things that you can apply. And later, let's imagine, go here, create effects / effects, heading 3 lines gradient. So now I know that when I create another text anywhere, and it will have 3 lines, so instead of, maybe we use 80, you see the first line is black, the second one is gray already. If I do this, so then we have this effect, which is also a pretty interesting one. But now when I change the size of it, where we have 3 lines, the second line is gray. As I said, this is not a perfect way, because you will have to make lots of checks, design QA sessions, that everything works perfectly, and that this is not like when we have 4 lines, it doesn't look like in this case. And especially when it comes to web design, it's really like important. But what you can do if you like, oh, okay, it doesn't look perfect, how we can change that? Well, we'll just go to effects here, edit, and maybe for the gradient, we will make the gradient between black and gray a little bit smoother. And now we will have a unique effect that nobody have ever used yet, but you know about it. And now it looks like the text goes inside, like a black hole inside of the right in the middle here. Or in this case, the text go inside and then appears again. You got it? So this is how you can use your resourcefulness and creativity to apply different effects for different styles. This is what we achieved already here using 5 different effects. But let's create the 6th one, and this will be for the section. For the section, you can use effect for the gradient. So here on the background, what you can see, what I created here, let me go step by step. Initially what we had just white color, which looks already great. For the website, it would be awesome. Perfect, beautiful, but maybe a little bit empty. And today, people prefer to add some additional elements just for the style. If you want to do that, just go for it. What we can do, we can apply the patterns. You learned how to create different styles of patterns in the graphic design module. So now let's apply the pattern. And the pattern that I have here is pretty simple. It's just 2 lines that create this effect. We can go with this style, but what if we don't want to overwhelm users with all these lines? We just want to show that there is kind of a background effect here, like a texture, but it doesn't take so much of our attention. In this case, I created the radial gradient that goes from white to transparent. Boom. So if you take a look at that, if I make it wider, you will see more of this effect. And that's it. So when you give it to a developer will apply 2 different backgrounds. The first one will be the pattern itself. That will be really just a tiny image. And then they will use repeat for both X and Y position, and boom, this is how you create these cells on the background. And the second one will be the background gradient, radial, that will go from middle of the screen up to like 70% of the screen. And that's it, and this is how you create this effect. But what's awesome, that you can convert the entire fill layer here, create an effect. And you can call it something like effects background section cell, or whatever you want to call it. But here section, or maybe let's call it section 1. If you have only one background like that, then it will be effects background section. That's it. But maybe if you decide to create another one, or another one for the dark theme, then it will be light theme. Create style. So now, when you create another section for the website, 1440 by 900, you know that you just, instead of fill layer FFF, you just go to effects and apply effects background section light. So just in case, exactly what we just created, light theme. And boom, you have it. And what's cool about that, that even the section, if the section is smaller, The gradient only will change. The background will stay the same. And you can apply it even when you create something like quote about something mind-blowingly cool about effects. Yep. 900. Alt H, Alt F, a little bit bigger. And because we, you know, a little bit perfectionists, this is what we will do. It's a little bit too much. 60, Alt H, smaller, somewhere in the middle of the screen. And we don't forget about the details and heading punctuation. Boom, done. This is one, for example, this will be one of the sections of your website. Another section can be instead much bigger. Maybe you will use it not for just hero section, but you will use it to type benefits of our product. Not products, product. And here you will have benefit 1. Of course, it will be smaller here. Let's check what we have here. Maybe H4. And for this element, we will use H2. Because we already created the style guide, right? So benefit 1, benefit 2, benefit, we can go this way. 3, and benefit 4. You see, when the section even bigger, we still have the same, like perfectly looking background here as an effect. So you don't have to create and change all these elements for the sections. You will use it as an effect. That's it. As simple as that. And maybe if you decide to change it to the dark theme, well, then we'll need to make some changes. And here, the first thing that I will do probably, I will change the radial gradient to the dark version. The second thing that I would do, I would use dark for the like initial background. And for the image here, I will use exposure, contrast minus, and highlights a little bit higher, and shadows a little bit higher. So now I have this, but we don't see text right now. Also for the background, I will use darker, even darker version. But now we don't see the background here, but we remember that for later, we'll be able to apply for the section, like if it's like an actual website, you will be able to apply the colors from our theme that we created before, not the text, but fill here, white, or if you already created color, text, button, primary, default, the same you are creating for the headings, just white, and that's it. This is how it works. This is how you change it to the dark theme. But instead of black, you can use some different colors. You see, and now, out of this, that effect, let's make some changes, by the way, still. Like that, like this, and for the background, also a little bit purplish, done, and the color, they don't look like perfect here, so I would use light gray just to make it look even better. The final thing that I would do is just I would go here, create, effects, background or section, and here we will use dark theme, create style. That's it. So now I can go here to this layer, for example, and for this color I will apply the white, and for the section, instead of the light color, I will apply the dark one. Done. You see, we have everything that we had before. Looks perfect, looks amazing. The next effect sections we covered, images. Well, the same what we created for the style for the background here, we can create the same. Let's imagine that you have an image, and for this image you have a card. Let's imagine you have a card, and here we will have white and maybe with 20%, 20 points corner radius. Here I also can create an additional effect specifically for cards, so it can be for images and cards. So for the card I will use something like 4, 8 here, or maybe something bigger to make it smooth, really smooth. So I will go with 20, 30, minus 10, similar to what we had, maybe even 30 here. The only thing that for the color here, we can apply light gray, what we had before, what we created. You see that we haven't created a library, and because of that we see only document colors, but we can apply the light colors, the extra gray that we created, and just change the opacity of it, something different. So now we have a card, but let's imagine for this card is inside of the frame, because it's a card, it will be UI component later. For this card here, I will at the top I'll have the image. What I can do really interesting for this image, I can take our effects that we created for section, the light one, but instead of having these big cells, I detach this element, go to image, change the tile to 25%, so twice smaller, and now I have the effect applied to the background of the image. And even if I create here an additional image, let's go to Unsplash. In the search, let's type product and find something that can be easily applied. Yeah, like this. Watches, change the layer to multiply, and now I have image of the watches on top of the background, and this background connects us with of course for this section I wouldn't apply the same style. No, this section would be, in my opinion, just pure white. And here, this additional, by the way, I would create for the card. Probably I would choose different styles. Maybe I would make a different color, or I would use stroke with one of our light colors that we had before. So now we have, okay, because we have it here, Command C, I'm gonna delete this layer completely as a background, because we will use our frame. We apply, so I still have it here. We'll use our frame as an element, and for the frame definitely we'll have to check that the image doesn't go outside of the element, and that it also has the same corner radius at the top. So always check these elements. When we'll create UI components, we will do all these things, so you will know how it works exactly. But the image that we have here, it has already the background, and that background can be converted into also in effects, where we create effects / effects background image, create style. So now later, let's imagine that you will create a completely separate element here with the section where the text will be on the left side, and on the right side you will have an image, But for that specific image, you will have the image effect, background image. And now inside of this image, you will put something that you want to put. Even now, it looks already cool, just with these sections. But on top of that, maybe you'll create later to show if it's a SaaS product, you will create an additional element just to show here in the effects button, primary hover. Yep, detach it. And for the color, we will use something from here, 25% or 20%. Done. So let's imagine that you are showing what's inside, will be inside of that product that you are building. And this is how you create the background. And on top of this, from the pattern, and on top of it, you add your UI elements. And boom, we just created an additional section for our UI kit that we'll be using in the future. Done. So this is an additional effect that I wanted to show you. In addition, for the image, we can use this drop shadow that we just created, plus create style, effects, /effects, here, image, image, drop shadow, create style. Now I'll apply this style here. Done. So later, if I want to change the style to some particular color, let's imagine here, I will go to effects, edit, and I will be able to change it, not to background image, but okay, I named it differently probably. Effects, and here image drop shadow. You see the drop shadows are separate from the effects colors. So just keep it in mind. So they have different elements here. Effect styles and just effects, color styles. And here we go to effects. And for the effects, let's imagine the drop shadow that I'm going to change to something different, to something larger, to make it softer, 60. You see it's already look different. Here I will use 60. And for the spread, -20. Something like that. And the color will have a little bit more color. It will not be gray, but it will have a little bit of color like this. You see? Look awesome. In addition to that, maybe I will decide, you know what? I'll take this shadow, Command D, and I'll create an additional shadow here, but not to make it look bolder, but instead, for the Y position, I'll use 20. For the blur position, I will use 30, spread -10, but the color that I'm going to use here will be white. Can you imagine? White. Like pure white. And here, like 60%, maybe even 10, 20, 0. And what we just created, we created the reflection from the back side of this image on the paper. So now we have more realistically looking shadow. And in addition to that, I'll probably add stroke. And for the stroke, I would use something really light gray. Even lighter. Yeah, maybe I go too deep here, and maybe I'll explain you too much, like how to create realistic effects. We'll create some of them. We already created lots of them in the graphic design model. We'll create a little bit more in the graphic design model, and then we'll just apply them here. But this is how you create these soft looking effects. And if you, for example, change the background of this entire element to something different than just pure white, something like F5, F6, F9. Now you have it, look at, you see it a little bit better. Oh, okay. I applied it to, we have a rectangle here. Why? We'll just remove it. much better. As you can see, if you're gonna do something like that, keep in mind that maybe you will have to change something in the effects. And for the effects, for the image drop shadow, what I'm gonna do here, not image drop shadow, for the image color, BG image, I'm gonna to hide the background, very background color, white. Remove that, and for the radial, we'll have to keep in mind that we will need to change the color to the color of the body that we will use. Done. So now everything looks even better. Just a little bit darker stroke shadow, stroke element here. Done, perfect. And I'll use it here as well. So this is how you create additional style, and this is how you create elevation and a really professional looking website that has these aesthetics that makes your website look luxury or look a little bit more, you know, detailed. If you have attention to detail, you don't want to make everything just pure white and black and just text written in Inter typeface and that's it. No, you go and think how you can make it even look cooler, and maybe you will put later even one of the elements on top of your text to make this additional effect that the text goes, you know, below all these elements. Looks awesome, right? And this is the effects that we just created. Now, headings. I already showed you how to create the gradient for heading, but sometimes you can apply the same effects, the same gradients that we have here to the entire heading. So here I just go to fill layer and I'm going to effects, and I'm applying effects gradient. Boom. Done for the entire text. And later, if I decide, for example, you know what, if I want to have different gradients, you can do that, or you just go and change the style here and change, let's imagine, the darker blue to something more purple and a little bit darker, and this version of the blue a little bit lighter and brighter, and this is how you achieve this effect. So you can apply the gradient as an effect to the headings and even to paragraphs. So I'm not going to apply it to the paragraph here because now it looks much better. And here I will do the same, fill, gradient, and now it has the same style. As you can see, we just created a couple of effects, and now just by clicking and choosing the styles, I apply them to the entire effect. And this is how cool is that, to create these effects up front before we start creating a website. Of course, you will have to go through the exploration stage and understand what exactly you're creating. My recommendation is to start with a just black and white color before you create the color style guides and more colors. My recommendation to you is to create the typography and use just one typeface first before you start applying and creating typography style guide. But what we create here, why we are doing it right now, because I assume that you already did all these things. Because this course is about how to do something with Figma. It's while I'm explaining you lots of advanced techniques, this course is still about how to use Figma for explaining how to create, like for the entire web design process. There will be a completely different course for that. How to create in the entire mobile app, it will be completely different, like separate course that will cover all this research, information architecture, the stages, exploration stage, how to go from exploration stage to the other stage. Do you need to go through the wireframe stage or not? Do you need to low fidelity, high fidelity? Those are for the web design course. This is what we will cover there. Here we're talking about Figma. So that's why I assume that you did research, you did information architecture, that you did already went through the exploration stage. Now you just think like, how can I make and apply these different styles? How can I create them in Figma. And this is what we do. We create the typography style guide, color style guide, effect style guide. So then you have your website that looks, maybe already looks great, but you see, you go through these stages and like, oh, this is what I can apply. This is what I can change. This is what I can improve. And then you just add all these additional styles and click choose style, choose style, choose color, choose effect, and boom, and your website looks completely different. Exactly what we are doing right now here. You see? Mind-blowing, right? So headings, got it. So for the headings, we can apply the gradient, we can apply different colors. My recommendation, don't apply for the text shadows, because when you apply shadows, here, let's choose from the effects and let's imagine like hover or active, like default state. Yeah. This automatically, if you want to make your designs look really cheap, looks junior style, then definitely create shadows for text. But if you don't have this purpose, if you want your websites to look professional, clean and beautiful, my recommendation to you is use, never apply shadows to text unless you know exactly what you're doing and for what. Okay? You can go with this style as well. Yep. So it shouldn't be exactly go from in the form of the funnel. You can go with this funnel, with this style. But if you creating a landing page, this is, we will cover a little bit of alignment here. I cover alignment, like all different styles of alignment in Typography Masters course. Here, I'll just show you what you can do with alignment when we'll start creating sections specifically for our website UI kit. Now, paragraphs. For the paragraphs, what you can use the same thing. So if you have instead black text, or if you, let's imagine that your paragraph is not part of the heading paragraph button, but it's a separate element, it's separate paragraph, but you want to highlight it somehow, you can apply the same styles as we just did to the paragraph. This is how it will work. And for the background, let's imagine that we had previously the section light. You can go with that, or maybe you can just detach it, remove the entire elements and just keep it white, or you will create a separate element with the radial where the color inside will be a little bit darker, like this. I'll also change the opacity just to make it darker from here. So you can go with this, but to me it doesn't look good, so I would just get rid of all the gradients here. I'll just use a pure section. Let's imagine that this is the second part that goes directly after the hero section. Then you can do this, and because the hero section, let's imagine that has its own style. So for the section, fill, go here, effects, BG section, right? And this is how we have this section, Shift O, so Shift 0. This is, let's imagine that you have your hero section, and then when you scroll through the page, you see the next section. It can be a quote if you want to, or it can be a separate element here. Just as a paragraph, and that's it. For the quotes, you can change the style to something completely different, to something like Garamond, for example. So it looks, the quotation mark looks a little bit different. Or if you don't want to go with Google style, You can go with Georgia. That will look a perfect quotation mark. Done. Then later you can convert if you don't want to use it as a text. Command-Shift-O. Now it's a shape. That's it. The only thing that for this shape, maybe you will want to use a different color, but it's up to you. You've got the idea. This is how you can do that. And this is how we created just right now a couple of sections using different styles. And the final one that I wanted to show you, not the final one, but still, this is just an example of how the section works. So here, remember that we have this style. For the style, we'll create, and this style is applied to rectangle, to the background, so I just remove it. I'll apply it to the section. Let's imagine this is body section. For the body, I apply this element. And now, when I create the website, really long one, you see I can scroll. This is where I will have all this background applied to the entire section. And the same can be applied. Let's imagine it will not be the best example, but I just want to show it to you. And here for the color, I will use just white. And for the section, I will use the effect. Not accent, not anything, but the effects that we already created. And the effects that we have here is, one of them can be just dark version, or another one, the gradient, that is applied to the entire body of the website. And this is how you create this gradient that is applied to absolutely everything with just one click. That's the power of effects, and that's the power of understanding of them. And then later, once you went through the exploration station, you know what exactly the effects that you're going to use. Just create them like we are creating here, and then you create out of them the effects style guide. Later, we'll combine everything into one style guide that we'll be using through the websites, through the components that we're going to use. And then icons and illustrations, well, the same here. So we can apply effects to icons and illustrations. And let's imagine that we have something like, I don't know, let's create something random here. I don't know exactly what I'm creating, I just want to show you what you can do here. So let's imagine you have something like a logo or an illustration, and then Command-E to create it just as one element. Let's change the corner radius to something like 40, maybe even more. Oh yeah, perfect, love it. And now this is an illustration. You can call it even here image and some name, logo. And then for this image or logo, illustration, whatever, you apply the color style of the gradient that we had before. Done. If you want to go crazy, you can go with something like, let's imagine effects here. And you see that now it has also that pattern that we had before, but I'll go with gradient. And now when you will apply and bring this element, all these elements here, and put the image a little bit further. Of course, later we will play with spacing and everything. And this is how we created an additional section, hero section, that also has an image inside of it. And by the way, the effects that you can apply, you can also create an effect that will use not particular pattern, but the entire image. It can be something like abstract, like this one, or this. But because we have mostly purple and perfect. So now you can create a style out of it, like out of everything. Of course, we don't need in this case that element. And here we'll create additional, it's not a variable in this case because we're using an image. So style, effects, /image, just as simple as that. We go here and then maybe we really go crazy and we apply this effect to the text, and this is how it looks. But now they match. The color of the heading matches with the illustration that we just created. The only thing that we will need to update our effect for the button. And here, in this case, the shadow will go from this to, I kind of like this dark purple. That looks great and attracts attention at the same time. And we will need to change the color of the shadow as well from the button. You see how simple. We just created so many different styles that you can apply to different sections, from dark theme to light theme, for the headings, for the buttons, for all these different things. So even we created some additional styles here. So later, when you think like where can I apply effects, these are the elements that you can apply. Basically everything that you see on web. And what exactly the effects that I could create, these are the effects that you can create. And later, if you decide, for example, to create, like we didn't cover the drop shadow in a shadow, just if you go to the graphic design module, you will find there how we create the soft UI elements. This is exactly what you can convert into a style, soft UI. So then in just one click, you will be able to apply the soft UI style. And also, we haven't covered the rounded corners here just because we will use them later when we'll create cards specifically. We can do that, but we'll use them in the form of variables a little bit later. When it comes to background blur, yeah, I want to cover that just in case if you want to use it in the future. Let's imagine for your navigation. So here I want to create this effect. So we are creating the element. Right now it will be like that. Okay, here it will be logo. On the right side you will have navigation, maybe button, maybe just navigation, and that's it. But for this particular style, we'll make it white color. In addition to that, what we're gonna do, we're gonna use effects, background blur, the color of the element, like the background blur value is something like 20. The color of the background will be 10% here. Done. Perfect. Now we need to check. So first of all, I'll combine everything into one shape. Command Option G. And now I want to check what it looked like. So this is what we'll see. So instead, for the background blur, maybe I want to go with something that will make the effect a little bit like not as visible. So I'm going to change the opacity to maybe even 50%, and the background blur will be like 40. Yeah, something like that. Maybe I will go even here with 80%. Why so? Just because I want to make it just a subtle effect that we are on top of the element, but at the same time we don't know exactly what it looks like. Now I take not the background, but I take the entire section, bring it back. Here, what I can do when I go to the prototype mode, for example, position, I just set it to fixed. And for the entire website, let's imagine that I have a website that is really like long like that, right? The only thing that we'll probably need to create something that is below there, like an element. Like that. And now, let me bring it to the very top. And now, for the entire frame, I said overflow, scroll vertical. Now when I go and click here, play, just to see what this website will look like when I start scrolling. And then I start scrolling, and you see we have this frozen glass effect for the navigation. When we hover, if you want to see it a little bit brighter, in this case, what we're going to do, we go to design, change the opacity to 50, the blur effect to something like 30. And in addition to that, what else I wanted to make? I think that's it. That will be more than enough. So now when we scroll, we see that everything goes behind the navigation, and we can change this effect to effects, and here it can be background glass effect, or frozen glass if you want to. And then later, let's imagine that you want to apply here not only like shadow, but instead of shadow, if you want to create, by the way, both shadow and this, then you create an additional element. So you can create, let's make it. I want to show everything to you. So detach here, I take this element, also effect detach. I take both of these, drop shadow, Command C, Command V. Now I have all three effects. I have drop shadow, and background blur. This is what it looks like. Remove this one. And out of all of these three, I create an effect. Plus here, name, effects, background, glass, shadow, create effect. So now when I go, I can remove even this section. I just select this element, and instead of this effect, I choose the one that we just created, glass shadow. Done. So now when I go to our prototype mode, I see that now our navigation has this shadow, but also when I scroll down, it also has the glass effect. So when we are hovering on the text, it is behind of everything, and this is how we create this smooth, beautiful. When I go, for example, to the full screen mode, probably you don't see the very top section, but you understand that this is the website that we will show to the client, and the effect that we just created with all these drop shadows, with this frozen effect, it creates wow effect. And this is what we can, even just this section, we just can create the Dribbble shot out of it and post it on Dribbble. We can create the entire website in this particular style and post it with all the typography style guides, color style guides, and effect style guides. We can post it on Behance, and that's it. One thing that bothers me, yes, when it comes to details, I'm obsessed with that, and every single time when I teach junior designers, mid designers, senior designers, in my company, I always put the attention on the details. And the details that you see here, that the image right now, because we added that scrollable element, now we see the image that has this border. We see this rectangle, and we want to avoid that. So that's why we are going and checking what we can do. We take the rectangle that we created that goes below there, and we just put it down. So now we see a perfect background here, but we can still scroll here because we have content below our area. And later when we'll start creating the websites, the actual websites, clip content, no. We'll bring, like, let's imagine all sections together. We'll bring our quotes, we will bring our additional elements. This is not the right visual hierarchy, but still, why not? This is what we have. this is what we see. But when we go to our prototype mode and we scroll, we see that we have a quote somewhere here, we have an additional section, and everything is hiding behind, and then we see the quote below. Just magic, using styles. This is what I want to show you today. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. It was pretty long one, but really important. Now let's create really simple short lesson about spacing. I'll show you where you can apply spacing, and that's exactly probably I'll show you how to apply the rounded corners. And see you in the next lesson.